So usually when we talk about human chemistry, there's this pervasive expectation of magic, right?
Right, yeah, like it's out of our hands.
Exactly. We treat it like this mystical force. You walk into a room, you meet someone, and either the sparks fly or they just don't. We just kind of accept whatever social weather the universe hands us.
And, I mean, it's a very passive way to view human interaction.
Yeah.
But there's a certain comfort in that passivity, you know? Because it entirely removes the burden of
Oh,
responsibility.
for sure.
If a networking event goes poorly, or say a date just completely falls flat,
Yeah.
it's way easier to chalk it up to a lack of destiny rather than a lack of skill.
Yeah, but then you step into the world of behavioral psychology, and that whole passive illusion just completely shatters.
It really does.
Because you realize you aren't just reacting to the social weather, you actually have the capacity to control it. We're navigating a landscape that's governed by, well, deeply predictable, biologically wired rules. So, our mission for today's deep dive is to unpack a highly intriguing, almost supervillain sounding question. In Turkish, they phrase it perfectly. Herkesi nasıl kendiniz hayran bırakırsınız?
Oh, I love that.
Right. Basically, how do you make everyone admire you, like you, and just fundamentally believe you are great?
Well, phrased like that, it does sound a bit like a superpower.
It does.
But to set the parameters right out of the gate for you listening,
Yeah.
we are not discussing, manipulation or cheap parlor tricks.
No, definitely not.
We're analyzing the psychological architecture laid out in David J. Lieberman's work, specifically his book, Get Anyone to Do Anything. We are really just looking at the nuts and bolts of human connection.
And what Lieberman's research does is completely flip the script on traditional relationship advice, because genuine connection, it isn't about twisting someone's arm.
Right?
It's about orchestrating very specific psychological conditions that allow natural chemistry to just flourish. Human beings have this innate evolutionary drive to bond, right?
We do, but our egos get in the way.
Exactly. Our fears of rejection, our general insecurities, they create massive interference. So today, we're equipping you with the behavioral formula to bypass that interference and gain an immediate advantage in literally any dynamic.
And that's the core objective here. It's about engineering an environment where the other person's submerged desire to connect feels totally safe to surface.
Yeah.
We derive immense psychological satisfaction when we bond, when we help, and when we feel understood. This deep dive is really about understanding the triggers that facilitate that natural state.
So let's start with the absolute baseline. Before you can get someone to admire you, you have to get them to simply notice you and, associate you with positive feelings.
The foundation of likability.
Right. And if we look at the data, that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, is actually fundamentally backwards.
It is arguably one of the most enduring myths in social dynamics, honestly.
Really?
Oh, yeah. In behavioral science, we see the exact opposite effect through what's known as repeat exposure.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So there's a landmark 1982 study by Moreland and Zajong, and it demonstrated that repeated exposure to a stimulus, in this case another human being, actually generates a greater appreciation and liking of that person.
As long as you weren't a jerk to them first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Provided your very first interaction wasn't overtly hostile, familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It's actually the biological prerequisite for fondness.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is this kind of like how a song you initially felt totally neutral about suddenly becomes your favorite track just because it's, always playing in the background at your favorite coffee shop?
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the mechanism behind that is cognitive ease.
Right.
The brain is basically a predictive engine trying to conserve energy. When it encounters a novel stimulus, like a total stranger, the amygdala fires up.
This threat detector.
Exactly. It has to evaluate, is this person a threat? Do I need to be on guard? But with repeated exposure, that cognitive load drops significantly.
Because they become predictable.
You hit it on the head. Familiarity signals safety. The more you are simply present in someone's environment, the more their brain categorizes you as a known, safe variable.
Wow.
And that reduction in threat assessment translates directly into a feeling of comfort, which we then interpret as likability. It's so deeply entrenched that people consistently rate the letters of the alphabet that appear in their own names as inherently more attractive than other letters.
Wait, really? Just the letters in their name?
Just the letters. The familiar is universally preferred.
That is wild. Okay, so proximity is power. Just by occupying the same physical space regularly, you're laying the groundwork. But Timing has to play a role here, right? I mean, you can't just stand next to someone like a potted plant and expect them to fall in love with you.
No, you definitely can't. Timing is the multiplier here. This brings in the law of association.
Okay.
To really leverage proximity, you need to pair your physical presence with their pre-existing pleasurable states.
So catch them when they're happy.
Essentially, yes. You engage with them when they're experiencing a dopamine or serotonin spike, when they're in a great mood, or maybe thrilled about a recent success. Their brain will unconsciously anchor those elevated positive emotions directly onto you.
But if I catch them on a bad day?
Conversely, yeah, if you force an interaction when they're highly stressed or in physical pain, they'll unconsciously associate you with that discomfort.
We're basically talking about Pavlovian conditioning applied to networking.
That's exactly what it is.
But the hurdle there is accurately reading the room. People are so adept at masking their true emotional states. We all have that polite, deadpan expression we wear at the office. So how do we bypass the mask to know if it's actually the right time to approach?
Well, the behavioral tells are actually quite difficult to fake if you know where to look. It really comes down to micro-expressions.
Like what?
Specifically, the distinction between a genuine Duchenne smile and a forced smile. If someone is genuinely in a good mood, they exhibit a full-face smile.
The eye crinkle, right.
Yes. The zygomatic major muscle raises the corners of the mouth, but more importantly, the orbicularis oculi muscle contracts, which crinkles the skin around the eyes. That eye involvement is completely involuntary.
So if there's no crinkle, abort the mission.
Pretty much. If they only stretch their lips horizontally while the upper half of their face is totally rigid, that's a forced courtesy smile. They're signaling politeness, not pleasure.
The classic polite grimace. And I imagine eye contact is a secondary metric there. Like, if we're feeling open, we maintain steady eye contact.
Exactly. When we're defensive or stressed, our gaze naturally averts to reduce incoming sensory data. Downward or shifting gaze indicates a closed-off state.
Okay, so the green light is the genuine eye-crinkling smile paired with sustained direct eye contact.
That is exactly when you establish your presence.
Okay, so we've got the foundation. We've mastered proximity and timing. We're consistently around this person when they're in a receptive state. The next phase the sources point to is actively building a psychological bridge.
Right, rapport.
We need them to feel deeply understood. Now, this is where I want to push back a bit because conventional wisdom says if I want you to admire me, shouldn't I be bending over backward to do nice things for you? Like buying you coffee, running your errands, proving my value.
See, what's fascinating here is that is the intuitive approach, and it is almost universally counterproductive.
Really? Doing nice things is bad.
If you want to accelerate someone's affection for you, they need to perform the favor for you.
Okay, wait. The Benjamin Franklin effect.
Yes, exactly.
This completely short-circuits how we think about transactional relationships. If I want you to like me, I shouldn't buy you a coffee. I should ask you to pick one up for me. Walk us through the mental gymnastics the brain does to make that actually work.
It hinges entirely on cognitive dissonance. Humans have this profound psychological need for internal consistency.
Okay.
Our beliefs and our actions absolutely must align. When they don't, it creates a state of psychological friction that is deeply uncomfortable. So if I perform a favor for you, my brain is instantly confronted with a dilemma.
Because it's asking, why am I doing this?
Exactly. It asks, why am I expending my finite time and energy on this person? I can't undo the action, so to resolve the dissonance, my brain retroactively alters my belief.
Oh, wow.
It basically weaves a narrative. I must really value and like this person, otherwise I would never have gone out of my way to help them.
That is such a brilliant hack of our own rationalization process. We're literally tricking our own brains into justifying our behavior by manufacturing affection.
Yes.
It's wild because the research notes this works in the negative too. Like if we accidentally harm someone or treat them poorly, we actually begin to dislike them more, simply to justify our toxic behavior.
Right. We tell ourselves I snapped at him because he's an idiot, rather than admitting I was emotionally dysregulated and made a mistake.
We constantly rewrite our internal scripts to remain the hero of our own story.
We really do. So by allowing someone to do small favors for you, you give them the opportunity to write you into their script as someone totally worthy of their investment.
Okay, so once they're invested, how do we reinforce that?
Once that investment is established, you reinforce it from your end. through what Lieberman calls reciprocal affection.
Which means letting them know the feeling is mutual. But, I mean, there's a calibration issue here, right? You can't just corner an acquaintance and declare them the most fascinating person alive.
No, please don't do that. That triggers the exact threat assessment alarms we talked about earlier.
Right.
The calibration is everything. The affection must be gradual. Behavioral data shows that a slow, escalating trajectory of liking is infinitely more believable and effective than immediate, unearned adoration.
That makes sense.
And you build this gradual rapport by leaning into similarities. It's the principle of homophily, like attracts like.
Oh, the comrades in arms effect. We see this constantly. Two people who have absolutely nothing in common can form this lifelong bond simply because they survived. Like a grueling corporate merger or a terrible travel delay together.
Exactly. Shared adversity or shared environments create a profound tribal shortcut. It creates a visceral sense of, this person understands my reality.
And can we manufacture that feeling?
You can intentionally signal this alignment through nonverbal mirroring.
Oh, like body language.
Right. If you subtly match their physical gestures, say their hand is in their pocket, so you casually put yours in yours, or you match the tempo of their speech. If they speak slowly, you speak slowly.
You're speaking directly to their mirror neuron system.
Precisely. You're physically demonstrating that the two of you are operating on the exact same frequency.
Okay, but I see a massive trap here.
Right.
If we execute all this perfectly, we nail the proximity, we utilize the cognitive dissonance, we mirror their body language flawlessly, it's very easy to accidentally project an aura of complete, untouchable perfection.
Yes, it is.
And we naturally assume that to be admired, we must be flawless, right? So what does this all mean for our ego? If we want people to think we're great, don't we need to hide our flaws and project total confidence?
It's totally counterintuitive. But perfection is actually an incredible barrier to connection. The research labels this the he's only human principle.
Okay, break that down.
When you present as a flawless archetype, you don't inspire connection. You actually inspire comparison. And usually, the other person feels totally inadequate by that comparison. As the behavioral science emphasizes over and over, people ultimately like you based on how your presence makes them feel about themselves.
This brings to mind that classic 1966 study by Aronson, the pratfall experiment.
Oh, the coffee spill.
Yes. They found that if a highly competent, impressive person does something completely clumsy, like spilling a cup of coffee all over themselves and they just laugh it off, their likability actually skyrockets.
Because the clumsiness shatters the pedestal. It proves they're accessible. True confidence is not the absence of mistakes. It's the emotional regulation to not take those mistakes too seriously.
So doing something a little embarrassing makes you more approachable.
Exactly. Self-deprecating humor and vulnerability are the ultimate tools to ingratiate yourself because they signal to the other person that they don't have to be perfect around you either.
But the nuance there, and this is key, is that you already have to be viewed as competent for the pratfall to work, right? If you haven't established your value, spilling coffee just makes you look like a mess.
That is a very important distinction, yes.
Which brings us to the primacy effect, the initial filter through which all our subsequent behavior is judged.
Right, the primacy effect dictates that first impressions are disproportionately sticky.
Right.
If you establish a positive, competent first impression, your future mistakes are categorized as charming quirks. If your first impression is negative, those exact same mistakes are viewed as confirmation of your incompetence.
It's a harsh reality.
It is. And the most effective biological tool for securing that positive first impression is the genuine smile we discussed earlier. A real smile universally conveys unconditional acceptance. It tells their nervous system, you are safe with me.
And the sources mention we can actually stack the deck before we even smile through this concept of priming.
Oh, priming is fascinating.
Right. We can basically manipulate the semantic memory networks of the person we're about to meet. If I send an email or a resume ahead of a meeting and I intentionally embed words like energetic, assertive, and passionate, I'm literally warming up those specific neural pathways in their brain.
You're setting the stage.
Yeah. So when I walk in, they unconsciously project those exact traits onto me.
You are effectively constructing the lens through which they view you. But, even with priming, interactions can go sideways.
Oh, for sure.
If you do happen to completely bomb a first impression, say you make a culturally tone-deaf comment or you're just deeply awkward, there's a highly specific behavioral rescue phrase.
Right, because if you ruin the interaction, the human instinct is to defend, deflect, or explain away the behavior.
Of course.
But the psychological countermove is to drop the shield entirely and just say, I feel so embarrassed.
Those 4 words perform incredible psychological heavy lifting.
Really? Just admitting it.
Just admitting it. Because, firstly, they demonstrate immediate accountability. Secondly, they showcase intense vulnerability, which triggers that he's only human empathy response we just talked about.
Wow.
And finally, it establishes a baseline of radical honesty. Even if they initially disliked your behavior, they now have to respect your transparency.
It instantly disarms their defensive posture because you aren't fighting them for the high ground, you're voluntarily yielding it.
Exactly.
That's incredibly practical. Okay, so we've established the architecture for making someone comfortably like us and respect us. We have laid the foundation of trust. But here is where we need to pivot.
Sorry.
How do we escalate the intensity? How do we transition from being a, likable, safe presence to someone they find irresistibly attractive and highly valuable?
Right. So this is the shift from the psychology of rapport to the psychology of passion. And the primary catalyst for that shift is emotion arousal, specifically the misattribution of arousal.
Okay, this is the two-factor theory of emotion at work. We're basically talking about utilizing adrenaline to manufacture attraction.
Yes.
When our body enters a state of physiological arousal, like a racing heart, elevated respiration, sweaty palms, the brain doesn't inherently know why we feel that way. It looks to the immediate environment for context to label that physical sensation.
That is the precise mechanism. So if you take someone on a roller coaster or to a really high-stakes sports game or even a mildly frightening movie, their autonomic nervous system absolutely floods with adrenaline.
Right.
Because you are the most salient focal point in their environment during that surge, their brain misattributes a significant portion of that intense physiological arousal directly to you. It literally interprets the adrenaline as romantic or passionate attraction.
You are basically hijacking their fight or flight response and rebranding it as passion. That's terrifying and fascinating.
Actually effective.
But attraction also relies heavily on perceived value, which brings in the law of scarcity. And here's where it gets really interesting, but I want to be careful here because this often gets misinterpreted as that toxic advice of, playing hard to get.
Right. It becomes toxic when it's used to induce anxiety. The law of scarcity, when applied healthfully, simply acknowledges that infinite availability diminishes perceived value. We inherently value what requires effort to attain.
It's like a rare collectible. If a diamond was as common as gravel, nobody would admire it. You have to be the diamond. But wait, doesn't creating that scarcity make you seem cold or aloof? We just spent the first half of this deep dive establishing that we need to make them feel accepted.
That's the tricky part.
Yeah.
But the distinction lies in objective praise versus absolute devotion.
Okay, explain that.
You absolutely want to treat the person well and validate them. You tell them you have a brilliant analytical mind, or you are an incredibly charismatic person. That objective praise builds their self-esteem and positions you as a confident evaluator of talent.
Right.
But you must never remove all uncertainty by declaring something like, "You are my entire world. I could never survive without you."
Ah, I see.
The moment you remove all doubt, you remove the scarcity. You transition from being a high-value prize to a guaranteed commodity. Removing all doubt basically erodes passion.
So, you are brilliant maintains your status as a peer. You are my everything surrenders your status entirely.
Precisely. And if you want to push this biological hacking of attraction to its absolute limit, the behavioral data points to a highly specific, highly potent technique. There's a 1989 study by Kellerman, Lewis, and Laird that essentially manufactured romance in a clinical setting.
Oh, this is the eye contact experiment.
Yes.
Where they brought in opposite-sex strangers and forced them to maintain unbroken eye contact for 2 solid minutes. And the results were staggering. They produced genuine, measurable feelings of passionate love between people who had literally never spoken a word to each other.
It sounds absurd until you look at the evolutionary context. Prolonged, unbroken eye contact is historically reserved for 2 specific scenarios in human evolution: combat or copulation.
Wow. Okay.
It is a profound hack of our autonomic nervous system. When you strip away the threat of combat, because you're in a safe environment, perhaps you're smiling gently, the brain defaults to the only other evolutionary explanation for that level of intense physiological focus.
It interprets the sustained gaze as deep romantic intimacy.
Exactly. The physical action precedes the emotion, not the other way around.
It is wild how malleable our emotional states actually are. Are there other environmental factors that artificially inflate attraction like that?
Well, there is a slightly darker psychological lever known as the rebound effect, which was demonstrated in a 1965 study by Walster and Hatfield.
The rebound effect, okay.
They found that human beings find others significantly more appealing if their own self-esteem has been temporarily injured.
So if someone has just suffered a professional setback or they're reeling from a personal rejection, their ego defenses are compromised.
Exactly. They are actively starved for validation, meaning anyone who approaches them and offers that validation is perceived as exponentially more attractive than they would be under normal circumstances.
Their internal baseline for value has dropped, so external validation is infinitely more precious.
Yes. And speaking of manipulating perceived value, the final mechanism involves the law of contrast and association.
Okay, how does that work?
When you enter a social space, how you are framed visually dictates how attractive you're perceived to be.
Mm,
If your goal is to appear as attractive as possible, it's best to be seen either entirely alone, projecting autonomous confidence,
right.
or accompanied by a highly attractive person of the opposite sex.
Wait, that feels counterintuitive. If I stand next to someone who is conventionally gorgeous, wouldn't the law of contrast make me look worse by comparison?
You would naturally assume so, but because you're of different sexes, the social grouping is viewed as a single, high-status unit. The law of association actually overrides the contrast. The inherent attractiveness and status of your companion radiate outward, and you are subconsciously perceived as more attractive simply by being affiliated with them.
That fundamentally rewrites how we typically approach social dynamics.
Mhm.
We have mapped out a massive amount of behavioral architecture today. Let's synthesize the core mission for everyone listening.
Let's do it.
Making everyone admire you, respect you, and desire your presence is not about being the loudest person in the room. It's not about projecting flawless perfection or overwhelming people with favors.
No, not at all.
It's an exercise in strategic vulnerability. It's about being present and leveraging cognitive fluency to become a safe, familiar face. It's letting them do small favors for you to trigger cognitive dissonance. It's laughing at your own mistakes to remain approachable. And it's deploying scarcity and eye contact to elevate your perceived value.
And tying all these mechanisms together is one immutable truth of behavioral psychology.
Mm.
Ultimately, someone likes you based on how you make them feel about themselves. These principles aren't about twisting someone's brain or serving your ego. They're about systematically removing the social friction so that their natural, submerged desires for connection can attach themselves securely to you.
You're just bringing those desires to the surface.
Exactly. That is the exact psychological reality.
Well, we will leave you with a final thought to mull over. Now that you understand the precise biological formula for why you suddenly find someone incredibly likable or irresistibly attractive, how will you react the next time a stranger casually mirrors your body language, asks you for a tiny favor, and gazes deeply into your eyes with a slow smile?
That's the real question.
Are you actually falling for them, or are they just running through the playbook on you? Until next time, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.